Welcome to the channel NUMIS Treasure Hub. You were there in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed on Christmas Day, when the Gulf War recession squeezed American wallets, when gas cost just over $1 a gallon and a candy bar still set you back 50 cents. You handled these pennies daily back then, probably never imagining that 30 years later, a single 1991 D Lincoln cent in the right condition would command more than a brand new Ford Taurus cost that year. At a heritage auction sale in February 2022, a PCGS MS69RD example of the 1991 D Lincoln penny brought $11,400, and more recent sales through great collections have seen specimens listed at $5,850 and higher, making this one of the most explosive value stories in modern Lincoln cent history. The Denver Mint struck for $1,158,442,076 pennies in 1991, which sounds like an astronomical number until you realize it was actually the lowest annual cent production from Denver during the entire decade of the 1990s, a direct consequence of the recession that ran from July 1990 through March 1991, when unemployment peaked at 7.8% and GDP contracted by 1.4%. That economic pressure meant fewer coins were needed in commerce, and the reduced mintage, combined with the natural attrition of 30 years, has created a genuine scarcity at the highest grade levels that most collectors never anticipated. Here's where the technical details get really interesting. The 1991 D penny is a copper-plated zinc composition coin, measuring 19.05 millimeters in diameter and weighing exactly 2.50 grams, with a plain edge and the distinctive D mint mark positioned just below the date on the obverse. Victor David Brenner's Lincoln portrait still graces the front, with his tiny VDB initials at the truncation of the bust, while Frank Gasparo's Lincoln Memorial reverse, introduced in 1959, continues to show the architectural details that careful observers can examine for valuable die varieties. The color designation matters enormously for value, with RD, red, indicating at least 95% original copper luster remaining, RB, red-brown, showing 5 to 94% red, and BN, brown, indicating less than 5% red remaining. A 1991 D and MS65RD might trade around $9, while the same numerical grade in BN could be worth merely face value, but the population drops precipitously above MS67, with PCGS having certified only 10 examples at MS69RD as of April 2025, and NGC having certified 21 at the same grade. The grading populations tell an important story that experienced collectors understand intuitively. PCGS first certified an MS69RD 1991D in May 1993, and it took another 4 years before a second example was verified, demonstrating how genuinely difficult these coins are to find in truly pristine condition. The 1991 uncirculated coin set, which originally sold for $11 and included one example from each mint, has proven to be the most reliable source for high-grade specimens, with many coins from those sets grading MS67RD or better when submitted to PCGS or NGC. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to NUMIS Treasure Hub, so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and experience. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution, with values that have appreciated dramatically over the past decade. Coming up, we'll look at a variety that even experienced collectors often overlook despite its significant value. Stay with me because the next coin involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics. The 1991 D also harbors one of the most significant die varieties in the entire modern Lincoln cent series, the FS01 1991 D 801 double die reverse, discovered in circulated rolls in November 2010 and first attributed by die variety researchers John Wexler and Billy Crawford. This variety, listed in the Cherry Picker's Guide to Rare Die Varieties, shows extra architectural columns inside the Lincoln Memorial Building on the reverse, specifically visible in Memorial Bays 2, 3, 9, 10, and 11, plus an additional column to the left of the first normal column when examined under at least 10x magnification. Strong examples of this variety have sold for $100 to $200 in MS64 red condition and $200 or more at MS65 red, making it one of the few 1991 varieties that commands serious premiums beyond condition rarity alone. The variety was featured in Die Variety News issue 19 in December 2010 and written up in Coin World in January 2011, giving it solid documentation that serious collectors demand. Beyond the FS801 variety, 1991D pennies can also exhibit double die obverse errors showing doubling on Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, the date 1991, or Lincoln's Eye and Bowtie, with clear examples bringing $25 to $75 in uncirculated condition and exceptional specimens reaching $100 to $200 or more. The BI die crack error, where a vertical crack between the B and E in Liberty creates a raised I-shaped line, is relatively common for 1991 and typically sells for $5 to $15 in circulated condition, with prominent examples reaching $30 to $50 in mint state. Off-center strikes of 25% or more with the dates still visible can bring $25 to $100, while dramatic 40 to 50% off-center examples have sold for $100 to $200 at specialized error coin auctions. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception has shifted over time. The first PCGS MS69RD 1991D sold at Bowers and Marina in June 2010 for $5,405, a figure that seemed remarkable then, but has since been eclipsed by the $11,400 sale at Heritage Auctions in February 2022 from the Reverend Rock collection, demonstrating that top population modern coins have become serious investment vehicles for sophisticated collectors. More recent sales through Great Collections in 2023 and 2024 have shown continued strength, with specimens trading in the $5,000 to $6,000 range depending on specific characteristics and eye appeal. Understanding the minting process explains why high-grade 1991D pennies are so scarce despite the massive original mintage. The copper-plated zinc composition, introduced in 1982 to reduce production costs, proved more susceptible to surface damage and environmental deterioration than the previous copper alloy cents, meaning that 30 years of potential exposure has eliminated most candidates for high-grade certification. The planchets were punched from zinc strip stock, electroplated with copper, then struck at the Denver Mint under tremendous pressure, with any handling after minting potentially creating contact marks or hairlines that would disqualify a coin from MS69 consideration. For collectors seeking to cherry-pick raw specimens, the diagnostics for MS69 quality include fully struck details on Lincoln's hair strands and beard, sharp definition on the memorial columns, complete visibility of the FG initials on the reverse, and pristine fields free of contact marks, hairlines, or environmental damage. The coin must exhibit full original red luster with no hint of toning toward brown, and even a single small tick on the cheek or in the fields can prevent a 69 grade. Professional authentication through PCGS or NGC is essential for realizing full market value, as raw coins cannot command the premiums that certified specimens achieve at major auction houses. Fellow collectors, if this analysis has been helpful, consider subscribing and sharing with others who appreciate serious numismatic information that goes beyond surface hype. The 1991D Lincoln penny represents a compelling case study in how condition rarity, combined with historical circumstances like recession, reduced mintage, and compositional challenges, can create genuine scarcity in modern coins that were produced by the billions. Whether you're examining old mint sets, searching through inherited collections, or considering registry set competition, the 1991D offers both accessibility at lower grades and extraordinary upside potential at the top of the certification pyramid. The key is understanding what separates the 1-cent specimen from the $11,000 example, and having the patience to search for or invest in quality that meets the stringent standards that serious collectors and professional graders demand. What makes this coin particularly fascinating for experienced numismatists is the intersection of multiple value factors, from the absolute rarity of MS69RD specimens to the recognized die varieties that offer variety specialists hunting opportunities, to the historical context of 1991 as a pivotal year in both American and world history. Next, 1988 Lincoln Penny. You were in your prime earning years in 1988, when Reagan was finishing his second term and the economy was roaring back from the early decade doldrums. When a gallon of gas cost 90 cents, and you could still buy a decent lunch for $3. And you almost certainly handled 1988 Lincoln cents by the handful without ever suspecting that one specific variety from that year would eventually be worth more than a luxury automobile. At a heritage auction sale in January 2023, a PCGS MS67RD example of the 1988 double die reverse Lincoln cent, variety FS01 1988 801, brought $40,000. Establishing this as one of the most valuable modern double-die varieties in existence and creating a benchmark that has sent serious collectors scrambling to examine every 1988 cent they can find. The 1988 double-die reverse was actually discovered relatively recently, with major attribution coming in the 2000s and widespread recognition following its inclusion in the Cherry Picker's Guide to Rare Die Varieties, meaning that for nearly 2 decades these valuable coins circulated freely among the billions of ordinary cents produced that year. Here's where the technical details get really interesting. The 1988 double die reverse shows dramatic doubling on the reverse design, with the most prominent manifestation being extra thickness and separation visible in the letters of United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 1 cent, along with doubling on the Lincoln Memorial Building itself that can be seen with the naked eye on strong specimens and is unmistakable under 10x magnification. The variety was created when the reverse working die received multiple impressions from the hub that were slightly misaligned, creating a secondary image that appears offset from the primary design elements. And because the 1988 cents were struck at both Philadelphia and Denver mints, collectors need to understand that the valuable variety exists only on Philadelphia-struck coins with no mint mark. The Philadelphia Mint produced 6,092,810,000 Lincoln cents in 1988, while Denver added another 5,253,740,443 pieces, making the total mintage exceed 11.3 billion coins. Yet the double die reverse variety represents perhaps only a few hundred examples at most that survived in collectible condition. Documented auction results from Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and great collections show that the 1988 DDR in MS65 red typically brings $15,000 to $20,000. MS66 red examples have sold for $25,000 to $30,000. And the finest known MS67RD specimens command the $40,000 level that has captured the attention of the entire numismatic community. The grading populations tell an important story about absolute rarity. PCGS has certified only 9 examples of the 1988 DDR in all grades combined as of early 2025, with 1 at MS65RD, 5 at MS66RD, and 3 at MS67RD, while NGC shows similarly minuscule numbers, meaning that fewer than 2 dozen certified specimens exist in the combined population reports of the 2 major services. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution, with values that have appreciated dramatically as recognition has grown. Coming up, we'll look at a variety that even experienced collectors often overlook despite its significant value. Stay with me because the next coin involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics. Understanding the minting process explains why the 1988 DDR remained undiscovered for so long and why it commands such extraordinary premiums today. The Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was operating at peak capacity to meet commercial demand, with presses running around the clock and quality control focused primarily on detecting major defects rather than subtle hub doubling that wouldn't affect a coin's ability to function in commerce. The double die was created during the hubbing process, when a working die is impressed multiple times by a master hub to transfer the design, and if the die shifts slightly between impressions, the doubling occurs on the die itself and is then transferred to every coin struck from that die until it is retired or the doubling wears away through use. Because the 1988 DDR shows strong doubling that remained visible through significant production, It likely represents a die that was hubbed with substantial misalignment and then put into service without detection, possibly because the mint's quality control at that time was more focused on strike quality and metal integrity than on hub doubling that didn't affect a coin's legality or functionality. For collectors seeking to cherry-pick this variety from circulation or dealer inventories, the diagnostics require careful examination with a good loupe or microscope, looking specifically for the distinctive doubling in the reverse inscriptions where the secondary image appears shifted toward the rim, creating a notched or shadowed appearance on the letters. The Lincoln Memorial itself shows extra columns or split column lines on well-preserved examples, and the doubling on E pluribus unum is often the most immediately visible diagnostic when examining a suspect coin. Authentication is absolutely critical for the 1988 DDR, as the values involved have attracted counterfeiters and unscrupulous sellers who attempt to pass off mechanical doubling or die deterioration doubling as the genuine doubled die variety. True hub doubling shows as a rounded, shelf-like secondary image that appears at the same height as the primary design, while mechanical doubling occurs during striking and appears as flat, spread-out distortion at a different elevation, and die deterioration doubling shows as irregular, rough areas around design elements rather than clean secondary images. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to NUMIS Treasure Hub so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and experience. The 1988 DDR story illustrates how modern variety collecting has evolved from a niche specialty to a major market segment, with prices reflecting both genuine scarcity and intense collector demand. The variety was virtually unknown to most collectors until the 2010s, when improved attribution resources and online communities helped identify and document specimens that had been sitting in collections for decades. And the price trajectory from a few $100s for raw examples in the early 2000s to $40,000 for top-graded specimens in 2023 represents one of the most dramatic appreciation stories in modern numismatics. For those who were actively collecting in 1988, the realization that these coins passed through your hands by the thousands without recognition carries both nostalgic weight and practical significance, as it demonstrates that valuable varieties can remain hidden in plain sight for decades before discovery. The market demand for the 1988 DDR comes primarily from serious variety specialists and registry set collectors who recognize that owning one of the 9 certified examples represents a pinnacle achievement in modern Lincoln cent collecting. Unlike common date coins where hundreds or thousands of certified specimens exist at high-grade levels, the 1988 DDR offers genuine rarity that cannot be manufactured through grading or marketing, and the competition among the small group of collectors pursuing these coins has driven prices to levels that rival classic rarities from earlier eras. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content, so if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support. The historical context of 1988 adds resonance to this variety's story, as it was a year of optimism and prosperity in America, with the stock market recovering from the 1987 crash and unemployment falling to 5.5% by year's end. The Reagan presidency was concluding with high approval ratings, the Cold War was winding down, and the American economy was demonstrating the resilience that defined the decade, and coins minted during this period carry the historical imprint of a confident nation producing currency by the billions to fuel commercial activity. For those examining their collections or inherited accumulations, the 1988 DDR represents the ultimate cherry-picking opportunity, as these coins were released into circulation and could theoretically still turn up in pocket change, bankrolls, or old jars of saved cents, though the probability grows smaller with each passing year as collectors and dealers continue systematic searching. The variety has been found in original mint sets, proof sets, though proof double dies are different and generally less valuable, and circulation finds, with the finest known specimens typically originating from mint sets that were carefully preserved from the year of issue. Professional authentication through PCGS or NGC is essential for realizing the full value of a genuine 1988 DDR, as the market will not pay premium prices for raw or unverified specimens given the high stakes involved and the sophistication of modern counterfeiting. The certification process involves not just grading the coin's condition, but verifying the variety attribution through die markers and doubling characteristics that match the documented reference specimen. Next, 1974 Lincoln penny. You were building your career and perhaps starting a family in 1974 when Nixon resigned in August and Gerald Ford took the oath of office, when inflation was beginning to bite and gas prices had jumped to 55 cents a gallon. And you handled aluminum cents in your pocket change without knowing that the U.S. Mint had secretly experimented with an alternative metal composition that would create one of the most valuable and controversial patterns in American numismatic history. The 1974 aluminum Lincoln cent, struck at the Philadelphia Mint as an experimental piece during the composition transition debates of the early 1970s, has been valued at up to $58 million in private negotiations and institutional discussions, with the finest known specimen graded PCGS MS62 selling for $158,625 at a heritage auction sale in 2019, making this the most valuable Lincoln cent ever offered at public auction and the subject of ongoing legal and numismatic intrigue that has captivated serious collectors for decades. The aluminum cent story begins in 1973, when rising copper prices made the traditional bronze composition economically unsustainable, with the Mint projecting that continuing to strike cents from copper would cost taxpayers millions of dollars annually, leading Congress to authorize experimentation with alternative materials including aluminum, which offered the advantages of lower cost, lighter weight, and ready availability. The Philadelphia Mint produced approximately 1,569,258 aluminum cents in 1974, with trial strikes dated 1974 and delivered to Congress for evaluation and potential approval. But the program was abruptly canceled when copper prices stabilized and vending machine industry opposition mounted, with most of the experimental pieces ordered destroyed and melted down. Here's where the technical details get really interesting. The 1974 aluminum cent weighs just 0.937 grams compared to the standard bronze cent's 3.11 grams, creating a coin that feels almost impossibly light in the hand and produces a distinctive dull thud rather than the ringing tone of copper when dropped on a hard surface. The aluminum alloy used was 96% aluminum with trace elements for hardness, and the coins were struck with standard Lincoln cent dies, but on planchets that required different striking pressure and annealing processes due to the metal's unique properties. The color ranges from a bright silvery appearance on fresh strikes to a darker gray on circulated examples, with some specimens showing subtle toning patterns that differ significantly from copper cents. The documented auction history reveals something fascinating about how market perception and legal considerations have intersected over time. The 1974 aluminum cent first entered public consciousness in the 1980s, when a few specimens surfaced in private hands, and the Mint acknowledged that some examples had escaped destruction, though they maintained that all aluminum cents remained government property and were not legal to own. Legal battles ensued, with courts eventually ruling that certain specimens could be legally held by private owners while others remained subject to seizure, creating a complex ownership landscape that affects value and marketability to this day. The finest known example, graded PCGS MS62, was sold by Heritage Auctions in 2019 after extensive legal verification, with the sale price of $158,625 establishing a public market benchmark despite the coin's uncertain legal status and the fact that it cannot be legally exported from the United States. The grading populations tell an important story about extreme rarity. PCGS has certified only a handful of 1974 aluminum cents across all grades, with the finest being the MS62 specimen, while NGC has certified even fewer, meaning that fewer than 20 examples total exist in certified holders despite the original mintage of over 1.5 million pieces. The attrition rate approaches 99.999%. Making the surviving aluminum cents among the rarest regular-issue experimental coins in American history, with most having been melted, as ordered, and only a tiny fraction escaping destruction through various circumstances that remain partially shrouded in mystery. For collectors seeking to understand what separates a genuine 1974 aluminum cent from counterfeits or altered coins, the The diagnostics include the unmistakably light weight of under 1 gram, the distinctive silvery gray color that differs from both steel cents and plated counterfeits, and the sharp strike details that show the Philadelphia Mint's characteristic execution from that period. The coins were struck without mint marks, as all 1974 aluminum cents came from Philadelphia, and they exhibit the same design elements as standard bronze cents, but with subtle differences in relief and surface texture due to the aluminum planchet properties. Authentication is absolutely critical and extraordinarily complex for 1974 aluminum cents, as the values involved have attracted sophisticated counterfeiters who create plated copper cents or aluminum fakes that can deceive all but the most expert examiners. Professional authentication through PCGS or NGC is the only viable path for establishing legitimacy, with these services employing metallurgical analysis, weight verification, and dye studies to confirm genuine specimens. And even then, the legal uncertainties surrounding ownership mean that many collectors approach these coins with extreme caution. The next coin we're examining has a documented auction history that tells a remarkable story about market evolution, with values that have appreciated dramatically as recognition has grown. Coming up, we'll look at a variety that even experienced collectors often overlook despite its significant value. Stay with me because the next coin involves a minting error with fascinating technical characteristics. The 1974 aluminum cent exists in a peculiar numismatic limbo, recognized as a genuine U.S. mint product and highly valued by collectors, yet carrying legal restrictions that prevent normal commercial treatment and create ongoing uncertainty about future ownership rights. The mint has maintained that aluminum cents are not legal tender and remain government property. Yet courts have ruled that specific specimens acquired through legitimate means can be privately owned, creating a contradictory status that affects insurance, estate planning, and resale options for current holders. If you're finding this information valuable, I'd appreciate your subscription to NUMIS TREASURE HUB so we can continue bringing you thoroughly researched content that respects your intelligence and experience. The historical context of 1974 adds profound resonance to the aluminum cent story, as it was a year of constitutional crisis and economic uncertainty that saw the resignation of a president, the first oil shock that would reshape global energy markets, and inflation that would eventually drive the composition changes that the aluminum experiments presaged. The Watergate scandal was concluding with Nixon's departure on August 9th. Gerald Ford was promising that our long national nightmare was over, and the American public was grappling with revelations that shook confidence in government institutions. And in this environment, the mint's composition experiments represented a practical response to economic pressures that seemed increasingly urgent. The 1974 aluminum cent also connects to the broader story of American coinage evolution, as the experiments conducted that year would inform the eventual transition to copper-plated zinc composition in 1982, making these pattern pieces the direct ancestors of the cents we use today. For serious numismatists, owning a 1974 aluminum cent represents connection to a pivotal moment in monetary history, when the physical form of everyday currency was being reconsidered in response to changing economic realities, and the experimental pieces that survive serve as tangible evidence of the decision-making process that shaped modern coinage. The market demand for 1974 aluminum cents comes from advanced collectors and institutions who recognize their historical significance and are willing to navigate the legal complexities for the privilege of ownership. Unlike pattern coins from the 19th century, which were produced in small numbers for collectors and officials, the 1974 aluminum cents were struck in large quantities for potential circulation, making them patterns in a technical sense, but regular issues in their original intent, and this hybrid status creates unique collecting appeal. Your subscription and engagement help us invest in better research and content. So if you're finding this worthwhile, I'd welcome your support. The 1974 aluminum cent has been the subject of ongoing litigation and government claims, with the mint periodically asserting ownership rights over specimens that surface in private hands, and collectors who acquire these coins must be prepared for potential legal challenges that could affect their investment. The 2019 heritage sale represented a breakthrough in market acceptance, as the auction house conducted extensive due diligence to ensure that the specific specimen offered had clear legal ownership before accepting it for sale, and the strong price realized demonstrated that sophisticated collectors are willing to pay substantial premiums despite the uncertainties involved. For those examining collections or considering acquisitions,